Hey there, I'm Will Roosh, high school teacher, and I'm going to talk about leadership today. We are in a crisis of leadership, and I have a guide for how to find good leaders. Here we go. All right, leadership. Let's get into it. Do you want to be a leader? Is the first thing that I ask my students. Do you want to be a leader? Like, you're a leader in education. It's essentially going from like classroom teacher up to like assistant principal, principal, maybe superintendent or something like that. That pathway was never something that appealed to me. Uh, Big reason is because I like being with my students. I like talking to students. I like being around young people and helping them to, form their own best version of themselves and guide them on the pathway that they want for their success. Uh, but a lot of people want to be in charge. A lot of people want to be a leader, but that's because they see the goal. They see the end. They see the end results. They see the crown, but heavy lies the crown. The crown is heavy because of responsibility. There's a tremendous amount of responsibility if you're a leader. You're responsible for other people. I love Jocko Willink, his books like Extreme Ownership and stuff like that. Talk about how, he's a Navy SEAL commander. And when he would lose a guy out in the field, I mean, that's on him. That's his whole concept of extreme ownership. So people think they want to be in charge, but do you really want to be in charge? So the first thing is you have to really ask people, do they want to be in charge? I think why matters a lot too. Okay. But I ask my students, do you want to be in charge? Do you want to take on massive amounts of responsibility? Because it's easier not to. If you're thinking about becoming a leader, well, it's needed. Okay. Institutional leadership has failed in many ways, causing distrust and conflict within American society. American society, we don't trust our leaders. Government, media, academia, corporate America, we don't trust all the stuff that happened with COVID broke so much trust, so much. We've all suffered from leadership that is lacking in moral development and critical thinking. That's what's missing among our leaders. Moral development and critical thinking. Moral development, critical thinking. So these are the things that we need to call our leaders to possess. What do we need? What are you going to look for? Well, we need leaders who can pass these three psychological tests. The first one is the Asch test, that tests conformity. Second one is the Milgram experiment, which tests obedience. And the third one is the Zimbardo, also known as the Stanford prison experiment. That's about social roles and cultural behavior. The Asch conformity experiment was done by Solomon Asch, and it conducted an experiment to investigate the extent to which social pressure from a majority group could affect a person to conform, going along with the group, peer pressure. I teach high school. Those kids conform. They don't want to stand out too much, because that gets a lot of attention. Those attention can come some arrows. So the Asch conformity test was basically, it was put up as a guise that it was about a visual acuity test. Like, let's test how good your eyes are. And there was supposed to be a whole bunch of people taking this test on visual acuity and stuff like that, where actually it was about one person and whether or not they're going to conform. So one person was the subject. The rest of them were just actors. So let's watch a video on the Asch experiment.
The Asch experiment is one of psychology's oldest and most popular pieces. Volunteer is told that he's taking part in a visual perception test. What he doesn't know is that the other participants are actors, and he's the only person taking part in the real test, which is actually about group.
The experiment you will be taking part in today involves the perception of line length. The task will be simply to look at the line here on the left and indicate which of the three lines on the right is equal to the length.
Actors have been told to match the wrong line. Volunteer will be monitored to see if he gives the correct answer or if he goes along with the opinion. In the first test, the correct answer is
2. Yeah, obviously. So they all say 1. It's like, well, like, no, yeah, come on. What am I seeing, right?
once again the correct answer.
Here it is. Here it is. Got him. Got him. Okay, so this is the Asch test. Now, part of the reason is we have evolved. Our evolutionary biology essentially rewards us more for being in the group than being correct. Because if you're in a tribe, and we're tribal creatures as human beings, if you're in a tribe and you are correct, but you're on your own, you're more likely to die than if you're incorrect, but you have a tribe looking out for you. So our brains are like, look, just go with the group. Just go with the group. So it's very hard to stand up to the group. It's very difficult. And that's what we need for a leader. For a leader, we need them to stand up to the group. Okay. So everyone is just going to say the same thing. Even if they're all thinking no, they want to stay within the group. And that's how these group dynamics get really wacky. This is the Asch test, just showing this kind of the way it works. A participant in the Asch test study. You just saw the video. All right. The next one is the Milgram experiment. Stanley Milgram, a psychologist at Yale University, conducted an experiment focusing on the conflict between obedience to authority and personal conscience. Milgram in 1963 examined justifications for acts of genocide offered by those accused at the World War II Nuremberg war criminal trials. Their defense often was based on obedience, that they were just following orders from their superiors. The experiments began in July 1961, a year after the trial of Adolf Eichmann in Jerusalem. Milgram devised the experiment to answer the question, could it be that Eichmann and his millions of accomplices in the Holocaust were just following orders? Could we call them all accomplices? This is kind of aligned with Hannah Arendt's book, The Banality of Evil. She studied the same Nuremberg trials. It's just like, why did you do that terrible thing? It's like, I don't know. I was told to. I'm doing my job. I'm not murdering Jews. I'm just putting turning this switch. I'm just closing this door. I was just doing what I was told. I don't know. I'm just doing what I'm told. I'm just, someone's in charge. Back to leadership, right? Someone's in charge. They're telling me what to do, so I'm going to do it. Even if you know it's wrong, you're going to do it. So let's watch the Milgram experiment. It's set up like this. There's a fake subject that pretends to feel pain behind a wall. And then there's the experimenter who urges the participant to keep going. Okay. The participant is the subject, okay, that they're brought in to basically ask a bunch of questions. The idea of this was to test to see if your memory improves with negative stimuli. So I ask you a question, and then if you get it wrong and you get a shock, will that make you more likely to get a right answer or a wrong answer? That's the way it was framed. But that's not what the experiment was. They did a switcheroo again, okay? Because that's how psychological experiments. They gotta kind of hide their hand a little bit to get accurate readings. So the subject is the person actually being studied. The fake test subject is part of the program, part of the experiment, and then the experimenter is the person who's actually looking for conformity, but the front is that they're the one who is kind of in charge. Like they're the one who's in charge, giving the orders. So here is the Milgram experiment.
A decade earlier, psychologist Stanley Milgram responded to understand how people here's what told him.
That's not real.
The teacher
There was no real shock, but he didn't know that.
the experiment requires you to continue teaching. Participants didn't know that the learner was really an actor, and the so-called shock hung. I got a shot, 180 volts.
I'm responsible if anything happens to him. Responsibility's off me? Okay, I'll keep going.
Volunteers were prepared to admit potentially fatal shock when encouraged by what they
Yeah. You know, there's a book called Ordinary Men by Christopher Browning about the people who started the Holocaust by going out and like shooting Jewish families in the woods, just one after the other after the other. And they were, that's the point of the book, is they're ordinary men. They didn't want to do it, but it was like their job and it's kind of an obligation. It was like, oh, I guess I got to do this. I don't want to let people down, so I'm going to do it, which sounds crazy to us. And we go, I would never do that. But that's what they said. Look at the My Lai massacre. Same thing. My Lai massacre of Vietnam. The young men that did that horrible massacre of, you know, hundreds of women and children and elderly in Vietnam, and people go, oh my gosh, they did that terrible stuff. They just butchered those people. I could never do that. You read the letters from those soldiers just a few weeks earlier. They were normal young men, and that's what's so important. But we need leaders who will go, I'm not shocking him. Are you out of your mind? No, no. You're gonna mess up the whole experiment. Oh well, but it's very difficult to do. Last one is the Stanford prison experiment, also the Zimbardo experiment. Philip Zimbardo and his colleagues in 1973 were interested in finding out whether the brutality reported among guards in American prisons was due to the sadistic personalities of the guards, or had it more to do with the prison environment. For example, prisoner and guards may have personalities which may conflict, inevitably, with the prisoners lacking respect for law and order and guards being domineering and aggressive. Alternatively, prisoners and guards may have behaved in a hostile manner due to the rigid power structure of the social environment in prisons. Zimbardo observed the behavior of the prisoners and guards as a researcher and also acted as a prison warden. Okay, so it basically made at Stanford University, made like a fake prison and brought in people to play the guards and then brought in people to play the prisoners. There are controversies around this about like who they chose, the way they kind of nudged the guards to be a little bit more cruel and stuff like that. That did happen. So people say, oh, this isn't a good experiment because the guards weren't just given the position. They were given the position and kind of like nudged. They were kind of like told, you know, you can go, you can kind of do whatever you want. Just go wild type of thing. And you could say that nullifies this experiment, but I don't think it does. Okay, I talked about the My Lai massacre. My Lai massacre there was people with tremendous power, the American soldiers with M16s, and then people with zero power, and that was the Vietnamese villagers. The Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq. It was a big controversy what happened there, 2003, 2004, where these people at this prison in Iraq, these Iraqis, were ridiculed. They were stripped down. They were peed on. It's terrible things. There was like they were put leashes around their necks and all kinds of stuff like that. It was really, really terrible. Someone was taking pictures and the pictures got leaked out. And people go, "Oh my gosh, this is terrible." Blah 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 blah. It was terrible, but you can't discount the Stanford prison experiment. You can't, because there's so much evidence of this or something resembling it everywhere. That's a paradox. There's a pattern of how people behave when they have tremendous power over another group of people, and they can kind of get away with it. You know, you're in the jungle of Vietnam. You're over in Iraq. No one's watching over you. You're in charge. You know, the Stanford prison experiment is like, no, you're in charge. This is your prison. You can do what you want. So you have all of those things free from you, like that would normally limit your behavior, and those things are gone. How do you act? Here's the Stanford prison experiment. Yeah, how far can I go? Yeah. Stanley Milgram was the warden, and he was just like, "Yep, do it." Yeah. So they actually changed and started to see like these people who were just their peers at Stanford as something different, something less than. You might know about like Robbers Cave experiment and stuff like that. Like once you see there's dividing people up, once you see this like tribal team stuff at play, it could be Democrats and Republicans, it could be a lot of things. It could be maskers and anti-maskers, and vaxxers and anti-vaxxers, and woke and MAGA and all that kind of stuff. Once you see them as different than you and less than, then who knows how you can act. Okay, this is the Stanford prison experiment. So those are 3 tests that we want our leaders to be able to follow. Okay. Questions would be like, what psychological test stood out to you as being the most important for our leaders? What would passing or failing each of these look like in a real world situation? And which do you think you would pass or fail? This requires self-awareness. Like, do you really think this? I ask my students this. I've never actually experimented on them with this. I've thought about it, but it's like, could get a little gnarly. And it's interesting. A lot of my students go, "Oh, I think I'd pass them all." I would say the line is the short line, not the one you guys are all saying. I would say I'm not shocking this guy at all, and I would say I will not abuse any of my peers, even though I'm a guard and they're a prisoner. Yeah, maybe. Everyone says that they would hide Anne Frank in their attic, but statistically, you wouldn't. Very, very, very few. Very few. What would be the best way to prepare yourself for such challenges? If you are watching this video, then this is because you take maybe being a leader seriously. And if that's the case, you got to put yourself in situations. You can't just reflect on this, like, how would I be? But you have to put yourself in these kinds of situations where you have a tremendous amount of power and free reign to do whatever you want, where you are in a situation where you know that the group is going in a direction or doing something that you know is wrong, but you stand up to them. And when an authority figure says it's okay to do something terrible and gives you some kind of like orders to do it, that you go, I don't care if I have orders to do this or not. I'm not doing it. So those are the 3 leadership tests I think are extremely important that we should put on our leaders in any kind of position, be leaders of families and leaders of countries, that we want leaders that can pass the Asch test, the Milgram experiment, and the Stanford prison experiment. So let's get started.